Hey everyone, so on this episode of Make It with Calvin, I'm going to take you through the process of putting together and detailing this little 1/48 scale wood building that I came up with, and why the one that you see here actually isn't the final model. So let's talk about it. So I know what you're going to be saying is, well, Calvin, why don't you want to use the one that you've got built there? Doesn't it look fine? And yeah, there's nothing really wrong with it. And the reason why I want to build a different version of this is when I was over at the O Scale West Train Show, I was able to procure some of this really interesting Simpson brand, I don't even know if the brand's around anymore, 1,000 thick steel corrugated stock. This is really cool. So this effectively simulates corrugated tin siding that you would have on buildings. And one thing that I've noticed when I've been out to places like Bodie, Death Valley, things like that, really awesome places to go and visit if you're into old mining structures, history, all that stuff, yada, 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 is some of the buildings actually had a wood frame, but to make them more durable, they would put up tin siding on the outside. I was thinking, you know what? That actually looked pretty cool on this building. And when I put this together, I mean, it looks good as it is. It's just the way it sits on my little layout setup is this door kind of faces off to nothing and a couple of other things. And I got to thinking to myself, well, you know what? If I'm going to do the tin siding, this building's not exactly set up exactly how I would want. It's easy enough for me just to laser cut a new set of parts and just put the scribes on the inside and leave the outside smooth. The other thing is I like building my buildings with the tab method, and even if I didn't do tabs, there would still be that dark edge from the laser cutting, and I have to kind of find a way to work around that. There are ways to cover it, but I figured, you know what? Why go through all that effort if I'm just going to cover the thing with tin anyways? And on this side, I think I'm also going to do the same thing, so it kind of blocks it in. I think I'm going to leave the end empty though. We'll see. That's kind of the beauty of a project like this and having my own laser cutter is if I change my mind, well, it's super easy to adjust that. So first things first, let's jump to a laser montage and then we'll come back and stain the parts. And then we'll need to give them some time to dry. So probably the next time you'll see this is a couple days later when I'm actually doing the assembly. All right, so here's the laser cut parts, relatively fresh off the laser actually. One thing I did do is I did make the scribes a little deeper and a little larger, so if you are looking in through the windows or the door, you can actually kind of see that on the inside. I figured, you know what, if I'm gonna go through all the effort to build this, I might as well try and take it to 11, because I'm Calvin and I do that. All right, it's obviously sometime in the future since I last filmed this, so let's get around to actually putting the building together. Now, because I'm going to be doing the metal siding for the outside, I'm going to be putting the scribing on the inside. So I'm saying this because Calvin has a history of not listening to himself while filming. So, you know, 2 seconds of talking about it now saves me a bunch of, oh, whoops, I should have done that. Don't ask me how I know. I've been there, I've done that enough times. So to put this together, normally I'll use a glue like Tight Bond. This stuff is absolute gold, no pun intended. But for this, I actually want it to go together relatively quickly. So I'm going to use a little bit of this Gorilla Super Glue Gel that I picked up over at Hobby Lobby. And the advantage of something like this is fact that it's, well, gel, and I'm totally not getting it on everything that I don't want it to. That is one of the advantages, though, of pre-staining the wood, is if for whatever reason I'm a little messy, it's not the end of the world. I will say this is the one thing that I love about tab construction on a building, is even if, you know, I didn't glue everything together perfectly the first time around with the walls, it always comes together. I know some people aren't a huge fan of it because you do have the seams, but oh well. That's coming together nicely, and I only barely stuck my fingers together. We're off to a great start. So this is already looking really good. Now the next step is we need to install this, which is the fake bracing for the sidewall here. Perfect. That's on there. So the original plan for the roof was I was going to use cardboard for this, but when I was trying to stain it with the Hunterline stain, not surprisingly, it gave me some issues, so I just cut this up really quick from some 16th inch ply. You will notice I did actually engrave a little line on here, so it actually helps me when it comes time to glue the roof on. So all I have to do now is just go, okay, that looks visually lined up, and once I got the glue on there, plop it down, and we're good to go. So that half is on, and then I pretty much just have to line up the other half, and that much is done. The one oh, check that out. That is coming together super awesomely. So next up, what I'm going to do, I think, is dig up and paint my windows, and realistically think about what I want to do for the siding. Do I really want to go with the corrugated metal on the side? Or the other thing that I was thinking is, I also saw buildings out in Bodie that literally had like metal squares hammered on them to form a siding. That's something that I could actually very easily laser cut out of some thin cardboard, spray paint it to look like, you know, rusty metal, and do that. So I'm still figuring that out. It's still a 50-50 thing, but a corrugated tin roof would actually work really well now that I think about it. So let me go ahead, brainstorm that a little bit, and then we'll come on back and dive into this a little more. All right, some quick Google photo search later, and it turns out it actually wasn't uncommon for buildings out there to have the tin siding. Actually makes a lot of sense, because even though you're in the desert, you do get a bit of dust and stuff blowing around, so I am going to use this. Now I have the original building here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as effectively a template. Cut the siding, which, as I said, it's very, very thin sheet metal, so it should cut relatively easily with my knife here. Yep. Then adhere that to the side. And if there is any excess hanging over the edge, what I think I can do with that really easily is just trim it or bend it and then work from there. So I think that's what we're going to do. And then, yeah, we can kind of do the same for the bottom part. Liberally applied on there, so we have a good bonding surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the top part of the siding, and then I'm going to slide. Yep, that'll do. Might be a little bit of a puddle. It's not going to be that big of a deal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a couple of minutes, obviously, to kind of set up, but you can already see that's looking pretty good. And yes, I'm well aware, in its current state, it is pretty shiny, but I think realistically speaking, with a little bit of weathering, it'll look a lot more realistic. So What I think I'm also going to do is just to provide a little bit of reinforcement, because I know that I can't get glue on everything and I want it to decently hold up. But if there's a little bit of it peeling away, I think that actually kind of adds to the visual effect of this, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Other nice thing is, because I still have easy access to the inside, what I'm thinking I can do is probably come along once all the glue is dried and just pop little pinholes in where the windows are, and then come back and carefully cut those out. If it's not perfect, the molding around the windows will compensate for that, so it's not that big of a deal. Glue down right there. But I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pause so I can... But my hope is if I give it enough time to dry out, what'll end up happening is when I go to do the other sides, I won't run into the same problems I was having before of things wanting to slide and, you know, just frustration inducing things like that, which I don't know about you, but I don't need that. So we'll come back to this in a bit and finish it up. Alright, so it's sometime later. I ended up installing all the siding on this off camera. What I did find helped was to apply contact cement to both the inside of the metal and the wood, let it get tacky, and then stick it on there. I found that gave better results. That being said, though, it was still a bit of a challenging process to pull off, so if you're going to do this, definitely take your time. The other idea that I had that might or might not work is if I had applied some double-sided adhesive to the wood before I went ahead and laser cut it, then peeled that off and then stuck the metal onto that is another option. It's hard to say. If anybody has any advice on how to do this, please let me know down below. I'd love to know. But one thing I will say is on this back wall are supposed to be 2 windows. Now for the moment, I think I'm actually going to hold off on them and see how I like the structure as it is, but I have that ability to pop them in there if I so chose. You could also argue that, you know, they decided they didn't need them, so that's what they did. Now, this window right here, though, does need to get punched out. So to do that, what I'm going to do is take some wood blocks here, just so we're not resting on the roof. And I know approximately where the window is at, so I'll take my X-Acto knife and just carefully punch a hole in the middle. It doesn't need to be perfect. The point is we're just trying to approximately cut things out here. And if the edge isn't perfect, it's not that big of a deal because we're going to have a window in there holding it in place as well. So these are the windows that I'm using. I got these from Tichy Train Group, and what I've done is I've just given them a coat of some red primer. I quite like the look of it, so I'm just going to pop it out of the sprue. We have ourselves a window. So obviously I'm going to need to install the doors on this. I think before I permanently install the windows, I might weather the building. We'll see, but I definitely don't want to leave it as shiny as it is now because I definitely think it's a little too shiny. So probably just hitting it with some light, you know, grayish tones and a little bit of rust and stuff will definitely knock it down. Obviously corrugated metal that's been galvanized has a bit of a dull look, so kind of going for that. But I do have to say though, this really is coming along quite nicely and I'm really happy with how it's turning out. It's definitely not something that I'd normally build, but I think it really will stand out on the layout in a good way. So let me go ahead and quickly pop the windows in just for the sake of the video, and the doors, which haven't been painted yet, but well, Alright, so you can't see it, but I got the second window in there. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build the doors off camera. Then we'll come on back and we'll take a look at it. Okay, so what I've done is obviously I've painted the windows and doors and installed them, and This is really coming together now. I am loving where this is at. Now obviously I'm going to want to tone down the shine here on this outside, and I definitely want to put something to simulate some weather stripping on the sides. I'm probably going to use just some thin styrene angle stock, but the local Hobby Lobby, which is my only source of plastic and brass parts, didn't have anything, and I don't think I have any in my personal stash. So next time I'm up by the hobby shop, I'll go ahead and grab that. But there's still a lot of work that can still be done here. The next step is going to be, I think I'm going to do a faux tar paper roof on here for the moment. And I could always model as if they're putting up tin or shingles or something like that at a later time and date. But to do that, I'm going to use my favorite technique, which is the masking tape with the black paint. So let me go grab my masking tape and get started on that. All right, so all I'm using is just some regular white, tan, doesn't really matter, masking tape. And, oh yeah, gotta love that obnoxious sound. So what I'm gonna do is just apply strips of this to the model, and it's fine if it overhangs, we can just trim that off later. But the idea is we're kind of overlaying the strips by what seems like a reasonable amount, and we're just going to work our way up to the middle from both sides and then lay a piece over the top to simulate as if there was something on the top to prevent rain from getting in. Alright, so now we have the masking tape installed. Let me go ahead and grab my cutting mat, trim the tape to fit the size of this, dig out my matte black paint and get some paint on this. So I literally just used this super cheap black paint. This one is satin finish, which I think looks really nice for a tar paper effect. So I'm just gonna make myself a lazy man's thing to put my paint on here. Yep. Perfect. And then I'm just gonna use one of my dollar store paint brushes. Nice thing about these things is the fact that it's like, if you know it gets destroyed doing something like this, it's not like I destroyed a $10 paintbrush and I'm going, oh no, I destroyed a $10 paintbrush. That's a bummer. So, all right, check that out. Oh yeah, so definitely it looks a little bit shiny right now because it's still wet, and these sides are definitely too shiny. So what I think I'm going to do for that is I have not glued in the windows or the doors. I think I'm going to take some gray primer, some spray paint, spray it into a container, and then just kind of brush it on here to give it more of a matte effect. And then come back and maybe sponge on or something like that some rust effects, because obviously you will have a little bit of rust, but I want to wait until I've got the side covers on before I attempt that. But I have to say, this is coming along really nicely. For the moment, I've decided I think I'm going to keep this side open. I actually think that would look kind of cool. So you can see into there, see what's going on. But man, this project's really, really taken on a mind of its own. The other thing that I have thought about doing is maybe installing a really tiny LED light in the top there. Definitely one of those things that probably should have thought about before I installed the roof, but it's not something that I couldn't, you know, pull off if I really, you know, wanted to. It's one of those 50-50 things. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to illuminate the building or not. Another thought would be to put a small light up in the ceiling up here and have that shine down. That's also a possibility. Lots of things to consider. Still haven't, you know, finalized anything yet. I'm not sure how much I want to Dave Meek this. I don't mean that in a negative sense. Dave does some amazing model making. I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm just letting it speak to me, and how it feels that way is how I'm rolling with it. So there'll probably be a couple more days in real time and a jump cut in editing time, but I'll get back to you guys once I've acquired the components I need. All right, so what I've done is obviously I've popped out the windows and doors, and I've hit this with a coat of matte spray clear. You can't really tell on camera because of the lighting, but it's a lot less shiny, which is exactly what I want. That being said, though, it's not uncommon to have some portions of the metal be more shiny and others be less shiny. So I'm going to bust out my absolute favorite thing on the face of planet Earth, filler primer. No, really, I'm going to use some filler primer on here to kind of dry brush things. Now, as for the corners, I've decided for the moment I'm actually just going to keep them as is. It kind of gives it more of a, you know, we threw the tin siding up one day because we were having problems kind of look. If I can find some material to cover the corners, I'll do that, but I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. I do actually want to kind of get this done at this point. And for anyone wondering, I have ventilation in here. So I'm going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to wipe some of it off on my paper. I'm going to effectively kind of dry brush this on here in spots. Just kind of make it somewhat splotchy. Oh yeah. You can't really tell. Well, you might be able to. That's looking amazing. Check that out. That is a million times better. I also want to get a little bit of rust on there, so I'm going to use some rusty metal primer. I'm very much just dry brushing the rust on, but you can see there's a little bit of rust on there, and that also to be expected. All right, guys, this is where I'm going to call the building for now. I have to say I'm really, really impressed with how this turned out. Obviously, I've discussed putting lighting on it, and there's always details. I could always put, you know, some siding on there. But realistically speaking, you have to say to yourself, when a project reaches a point where you think it's pretty much near completion, it's probably time to stop, step back, reevaluate, and go from there. Now, as for the building itself, I might entertain the thoughts of offering this as a kit. If you guys are interested, let me know down below. This one was designed for On18 equipment, which is smaller than the On30 equipment that I run. And this would realistically only work with small equipment like a Davenport or maybe a Porter locomotive. Definitely could fit a small rail car underneath. But if you guys are interested, let me know and I'll see if I can't figure something out. Now, as for the rest of the layout that this is going on, it still has a long ways to go. But at least I have this structure done, so I'm waiting for some things to come in to design around. I've got this to go, hey, you know what? I got that much done. On to the next project. And as for the next project, well, you guys will have to wait around and see what that's going to be. Heck, half the time I don't even know what it's going to be. So I hope you guys enjoyed this build along series. If you did, please let me know down below. I'd love to hear your questions, comments, feedback, all that good stuff. And to the gentleman who sold me all the details over at the train show, if by some off chance you're watching this, thank you. It was an honor to take something that you had that you were gracious enough to offer to me for a very, very fair price and actually put it into something that I genuinely am super happy with. All right, see you guys later.